Hello? There we go. Hi. It's always good going after Justin. There are like mad scientists that create crazy stuff, and Justin is always the guy for years and years who's like on that cutting edge of stuff. So get Justin's email number. He's always coming up with amazing things, and if you have questions on things, definitely a good guy to talk to. So I want to talk a little bit about AI, following up and actually building on some of what he said. So first off, it is the buzzword of all buzzwords, right? If you do the AI drinking game and like walk around the vendor booths and take a shot every time you see AI, you're going to be stumbling pretty quick. So what is it and what isn't it, right? So it means a lot of things to a lot of people, and I think it's good just to kind of touch on where it is. And ultimately, we all need to, as technologists, need to understand like what's the goal. And I think there's always this this push to whatever the new tech is, let's go get that and use it and kind of have that method first. But really, it should be outcome first, right? And there's lots and lots of tools in the world, and AI is just the latest and greatest of those. But it doesn't mean that other tools in other ways don't work well, right? So really, it should be outcome focused on what am I trying to do and what's the right tool for that? Because hey, Excel does a lot of great stuff, and we shouldn't throw Excel out just because something else is here. So I think we've seen this evolution of things from like OCR and the RPA, UiPath and all that a few years ago, getting into more the business process automation, and now AI is really getting into this more, this kind of work from handwork, which is like, let's get our data. The what questions, like what are we doing? How much money are we making? All that into the whys, what's driving things, right? And I think that's the interesting thing about AI and what these tools let us do is it really lets us get to the questions around, what's driving the impactful things in our business. And with that, there's going to be lots of ways that we can change the business, change how things operate. So different companies are in different cycles. The great thing about real estate is that, all the different asset classes, they go through ups, they go through downs. Retail was dead and malls were empty and, on fire. And now, people reimagined it and malls are full, and the lifestyle. People want to get out and do that. Office right now has issues, right? Other areas are doing great. Data centers are on fire. So what I want to talk about today is a little bit about how maybe there could be some applications for AI, depending on where you're at. What your asset class is, what you're doing. The bad times there's opportunities. The good times there's opportunities, right, and challenges. So let's start with the worst. The tough time. Maybe you're in an asset class that's not in favor right now. Office has some challenges, and so how can these tools help with that, right? And so, in these times when there's stress in the business, people are pushing on expenses, and this is the classic: let's do less with more. Let's try to figure out ways to, cut costs, do more. But it also presents a challenge because I think when there are times when businesses are contracting or there's stress on the business, I think most companies are in a situation where, the critical thing beyond technology is always the people. And in those times, the most talented people tend to be the ones that are worried about it. And so how do you keep those people focused and engaged? Because losing some critical people at a bad time really can exacerbate it. So I think AI is an opportunity here where you can really engage with and focus on having your best and brightest work on the biggest problems. And chances are those folks are wanting to learn new skills, right? So Justin's point about like, how do you bring that business understanding of what you want to accomplish with this kind of new technology and tools available? This could be an opportunity because with downturns, typically you have a little more time, and time's always an issue with how you figure out what you're working on. But there are some really specific areas where I think you can use challenging times to bring this to bear. So first is just expenses, right? So automating things that are manual. This can be, typically back office operations, which I think get less, it's less glamorous, but a lot of opportunity there. So your AP cycle, your AR cycle, right? How are these things happening? Are you doing it the old-fashioned way with people on keyboards, or are you using technology to do those things? The burnout issue around folks who again tends to be cost-cutting, and so your few star players end up doing more and more and more, and when they leave, you got real problems. And that's where again I think there's an opportunity here with people's interest in learning these tools, that you can find a specific problem with that. So for example, Colony Capital, where I came from. So I was at Colony for 20 years, which is a big global REIT. I was the head of tech there, of kind of an accountant by background, a geek at heart. So Colony has had tough times over and over again. It's like a phoenix. Like you think it's going to fall apart and it grows. But Colony always invested really a lot into back office operations. So Colony was able to pivot really well. So in single family homes, they were the first to launch single family homes, right? Right before COVID hit, we merged with North Star in New York here. Worst merger of all time, right? We bought all this hotel and office and all that, and it was really challenging. But we were able to kind of incorporate that, and since the back office was able to pivot, the company was able to pivot very quickly without disaster. So Colony, time and time again, changed. Right now, it's Digital Bridge. It's a $70 billion AUM company, bigger than ever, because they were able to handle massive change where they'd invested in back office operations to manage multiple public companies and private equity funds. And so when COVID hit and they decided, you know what, we're going to sell $50 billion of office, industrial, hotels, medical office, all that, and start buying data centers and fiber networks and towers, that kind of investment they had made through the years, let them be agile, right? And so that's an area where you want to think about, hey, can we use tech now? Can we solve these mundane problems we have now so that when we do need to make big changes or be flexible or move around, we can actually accomplish that without blowing up the business, right? Without stressing that, you got to do your public company reporting and all that. So that's a good thing to think about is, hey, what can I do now with this time to make things better? So use it as a way to motivate your team, right? Teach them about the natural language models, teach them how to use these tools for their personal enhancement. I love Justin's slide on the kind of that step up of like helping your people be more effective than helping automate their business tasks. And again, I think some areas that are really useful, that customer interaction, the chat bots, the AR/AP cycle are definitely open for that. And we have some customers that recognize that every hour is precious, and it's what can you get them up that value chain, right? How to get out of the handwork into the head work and making decisions. So downtimes, look for efficiency. Look to use ways to incentivize your team and give them new tools because it's like, what are they looking for? If there's risk around where's the company going, it could be about what's my personal development opportunity here, right? And so that friction, I think, necessity is the mother of invention. So that friction time can definitely lead to really innovative, creative solutions where great things come out of. So that's that. AI in the normal times, right? Again, I think talent retention now is a recurring theme in all cycles. But it's a way of let me go back here one. But one big thing about AI is important is right now it's augmentation, not replacement. This is really critical because I think AI, all of us have gotten on ChatGPT and think this is incredible. Like, I can write a story for my kids that's customized for them in 2 seconds, which is turned into a nighttime routine. But, AI is really good at enhancing what a person's doing. But it is, I like to say it's like a very enthusiastic intern with terrible judgment, right? So you still need the person in the loop. It is not at the phase where you're fully, hands off because it's like a golden retriever. It wants to make you happy. So it will lie to you to think, to give you what it thinks you want. And so there's still this area of judgment of, hey, what is it doing? And we're not quite at the phase where we need to just let it loose because it will do crazy things. And so this is actually an interesting kind of convergence of there's a new generation of workers that have kind of very different expectations on what am I doing, what value am I adding, and the expectation around like moving numbers from one spreadsheet to the other it's much tougher to sell, right? And when I was starting, I just, but if my boss told me to do something, I would do it. There's a lot more pushback now on why am I doing this and what am I getting out of this? Am I enjoying my work? And so it's interesting with this, as this new generation is coming into the workforce and what they want to focus on as far as value add much quicker in their careers than normally kind of maybe 10 or 20 years ago you'd expect to put your dues in and do that. I think these tools are enabling you to much more quickly get to the value add part of the business. Again, I wish I had Justin's slide on that value add chain because that's what it's all about is kind of getting getting that mundane out of people's hands into it. And again, I think where there's really good opportunities for that now that are available today, right? Leasing chatbots, multifamily maintenance requests, variance analysis when it comes to accounting, reporting, and back office. Instead of the days of just trying to find that needle in a haystack of it, you can do this, put this stuff in, to a model or using you already have some tools around that or saying, hey, what's my biggest driver of budget to actual variance for this quarter, and have them get those answers, and then start to move into that. We're seeing it also on the corporate side. So investor side letters, we're seeing these kind of narrow and very deep applications of AI, which are being very effective. So Entra is a company. Like at Colony, we had troubles with 300 investor side letters and understanding, are we meeting and complying with that? Debt right now, debt covenants, is another area where these are things where you need to do it right. There's a lot of nuance and specific things you got to get right. And AI can do a very good job of doing that abstraction layer and kind of getting these key points out. And then you have a human going out and either executing on it or working through the issues that come up. So I think that's an area where it can definitely be helpful. So automating those mundane tasks, getting that career growth path, again, I think is a really important thing. Again, I think most companies, who your stars are and how do you keep them engaged and entertained. And I think, again, to say it 3 times, getting them skills that they know they can use, for years to come around this, latest and greatest technology. Absolutely a great way to get that, and also to connect the pieces across the company. I think a big challenge with real estate, and particularly, I think it's part of how these ERP systems like Yardi and RealPage and Nexus and Entrata work, is that they tend to be very silo and module specific. Where people, I'm an AP person, so I'm working on this bit, not really understanding the impact to accounting downstream or the data entry in front of that or the asset manager in front of that. With these AI tools, when you're starting to get this data all together, you really can bring consistency across the company, right? So like an accounts payable example, and this is, I'll give my plug on PredictAP. We're focused on accounts payable, and this grew out of my experience at Colony, where we paid 500,000 invoices a year, and we had solved the workflow and approval. You have Yardi or Nexus or Avid, whatever you want to use for that. There's lots of payment options around, everyone wants your money and your payments, so they want a percent of spend, so you can find a million good vendors there. But this intrinsic coding issue that came in was solved by, we had one woman, Krissa, who had been at the company for 30 years, and everyone has a Krissa, I've found, where they know everything about everything at your company. And Krissa retired, and we're a $50 billion company, we can't pay a bill because Krissa retired, because all that knowledge was in her head, and we were not aware that when all this turnover happens in AP, it's kind of a high knowledge position with low pay, that's turnover, and she made that invisible to everyone because she was answering the questions. I was a managing director there, and I'm like, how do I pay this IT bill? I asked Krissa, and that's an interesting way where now we're getting to that headwork of AI. Well, I can bring that knowledge into a central spot, right? And I can answer most questions about how we pay this bill. And that's where I think real estate's very unique and specific, in that it's very complicated, right? We have hundreds of entities or thousands of entities and SPVs, and you capitalize this expense, you don't capitalize this one's recoverable, this one's not, this one's in the CAM pool, this one's not. If you think about all that knowledge, right? If you're a new person coming in, that's very difficult to get. And when that person who's been there a long time leaves, it's traumatic, right? It takes months, if not longer, to do it, and what's happening to the business in the meantime. So that quest to get to the knowledge aspect and having some technology backstopping what your people know, so that there is turnover or they work on other things, that you do have tools in place that protect that information. And that's a great use case for AI. Again, you're seeing a lot of these very narrow, deep applications on lease abstraction, on AR and AP, on, again, the side letters I love because it was such a niche, but definitely a good company to look at. And then ultimately it comes down to, again, hey, if I'm Krissa and I'm, the only one that can answer these questions, it gets tiring at some point, and she retired, and left us in the lurch. So take care of your people that know things, and make them happy. This is a customer who this warmed our hearts when it's they get home a little earlier and able to spend time with the family. So then the last cycle, the good times. You're growing like crazy, right? Data centers right now, they're on fire. They are riding the wave. Other things like senior living, industrial, all of these are growing really, really rapidly. And so this is a whole different set of stresses. You kind of think about the stress of, hey, we're trying to do more with less in lean times. Well, now we're growing like crazy. One of our customers, a data center, went from 1 million square foot of data center space to 12. You can imagine growing your company 12 times in 2 years is crazy. And so what happens is people tend to like get hyper focused on their specific role and need. Again, losing that kind of look across the company. And so what ends up happening is that they do things that maybe solve their need. If they took 5 or 10 more minutes, that might have helped the other people downstream prevent an hour from their work, and be really efficient. They don't have the time for that. They don't have time to communicate or do that well. It's a challenge, and it's not necessarily just a tech challenge. It's more of a process and really a management challenge around getting people to still think holistically. But again, there are ways where these AI tools can help with bridging that gap and bringing things together on specific processes, right, around leasing and the lease communication or that maintenance thing or construction process where you're trying to coordinate everything from the on-site people doing the bricks and mortar work to accounting and even the capital marks. So you're doing draws and things like that and handling that. So looking at ways you can bridge things together with it. Are important. I think also in good times you need to think about what all times, again back to what you want your people doing, but the ability to have folks focus on the highest value add. So for example, on a construction with data centers, it's construction business, right? And you want those folks on site dealing with the actual issues of construction, not in the back room like figuring out how to code their invoice for a payment draw, right? And so multifamily is another good example, or senior living. Actually, senior living is a great example where they're doing well, like aging population, people need to go somewhere. And traditionally, the way that they've handled that was that each site handles let's use AP because that's my example again, but they handle the payments on site. And so if you think about it, you have a business manager of a facility, multifamily is the same way, business manager of the apartment complex. And what you want them doing is out there leasing space, talking to residents, dealing with that personal relationship there. You don't want them in the dark back office, like coding invoices 10 hours a week, and they don't want to do that either. And then also you have this turnover issue where someone new comes in a facility, you have 200 vendors, all these relationships and contracts. Like, how do you understand what you need to do? That knowledge, it takes a long time to get up to speed. And so this is an area where using AI to like mine your data. And back to Justin's point on like the data, we haven't got over you need good data, like that's fundamental for all this. But hey, you've paid an invoice, hundreds of times, thousands of times. There's a ton of value in that. And these tools can, kind of unlock that value. And it lets you maybe take that 10-hour-a-week job of paying invoices down to an hour a week. That's like step one. Step two would be, well, why is it being done in the field at all? Well, it's being done there because the knowledge is there. And that hasn't been really achieved. It hasn't really had a way to fix that to date. But with these tools where you can start to build these centralized models, you can actually make bigger changes like, well, let's not have this in the hands of the on-site people at all. Let's centralize it. And we've seen it. We have a customer that's done that where they had 110 facilities. They started with the on-site people doing it by hand, 6 to 8 hours a week, got down to an hour a week, and then they were able to do a big jump, which is centralize it. Now they have like 4 people for the whole company. That's their job to handle the exceptions around that. And the on-site people are freed up to do what they should be doing, which is adding value on-site, right? Dealing with residents, not in the back office, which, by the way, they don't want to do either, right? Which leads to that whole retention thing, especially at senior living, the getting people in there. That's a big part of it, is getting that. It enables you to, couple technology with process changes, which are going to let you just fundamentally change how your business operates. Centralization, I think, is a big trend right now with that, especially when you're looking to scale, right? Because getting these people up. Another thing is training, where when you're scaling, you're hiring people, you're filling roles. And I have yet to see a company where they have like a robust, amazing training, program. Typically, it's like, here's your desk, sit down, here's your Yardi login, like go see what they did, figure it out, right? That's a tough way to train, especially when people are busy. They don't have time to like sit with you and go through that. Now, maybe some companies have that figured out. I've kind of yet to see one. But if they can sit down at their job and have, a big chunk of their work, that is already teed up for them with that understanding and learning of what's happened before, be it variance analysis or lease processing or abstraction or what it is, using that tool not only to help your existing staff with it, but as a training aid for new folks where a lot of, the 80-20 rule of like 80% of stuff is very repetitive and has a clear, consistent pattern. What your employees would do would be what an AI model does, right? They would look at the history. They'd say, well, what did I do last month in this, or the month before, or the quarter before? They would look at it and they'd figure it out, and they'd make a post-it note and they'd teach themselves, right? And then when they get really stuck, they'd tap someone on the shoulder and say, what do I do here? I've never seen this before, right? AI can be that learning phase for people where they're looking at that history, right? Where they're going to be exposed to a situation. The AI model looks at the history and says, oh, if I see, it's this project and this building and this, we handle the accounting coding that way, right? And taking that first step. And that's a really good thing, is kind of using that past knowledge as not only, removing repetition from your employees, but helping bring people up. The other thing that we've seen is this standardization and consistency, which is a very big challenge for big companies, right? Because at the end of the day, you want to have very consistent, and I am very accounting back office focused. I'm an accountant by background, so it's the less glamorous side of things, but you got to get it done right. But what you have is a lot of variation, and that leads to difficulty when it comes to what's driving variance, what's doing that. And the reason is it's really tough to enforce data standards across an organization, especially if you're a big global organization. And what this AI models can do is really drive that consistency, because the models, if you do it well, it's going to have a basis of starting with your history, but you need to have a method of continuous learning, right? And so, for example, on our AP example, we start with, hey, you've paid bills for the past year. Let's get that. Let's learn from that. Then, how is it going to learn every day when you add new buildings, you change buildings, you change your accounting and all that? We're going to take that final approval in your already pay scan, whatever. We're feed it back at night and learn from that. So it's really you need some sort of invisible or consistent feedback cycle without the temptation to be the template approach, where you're having a human say, oh, we added a new building, so I need to make a new rule. Like, templates are a road to disaster. It's not really the long-term scalable way to do it. But when you do that, what you're going to find is that if you have 20 accountants, chances are, most firms, it's pretty consistent. We have probably 16, 17 are doing really well, doing what you want to do, and then 3 just want to get to lunch. They're picking the first GL account and getting through. And someone else, one of your star players, is fixing all their work at the end of the month, right? They're doing like reclasses and all that, which is very typical. You usually have some level, or the on-site asset manager does not care about the accounting coding. They're picking whatever the first general expense account that's hitting it. And then the accountants at the 3-day close at the end of the month are crushing themselves trying to reclass all this stuff. If you have a really well-developed, thought-out cycle around how do you have the machine continue to learn and do that, what you'll see is that that model will push convergent coding across the group. And it's a self-selecting thing where those who tend not to put as much attention and care into choices are probably going to take what the machine gives them. And that's probably more correct than what they were doing before, right? So that standardization and centralization, it's interesting. I see these kind of like, we're obsessed with accuracy and consistency, and you see this kind of growth. And the other interesting thing, just from a human nature perspective, is that a lot of times there's not good communication maybe on the downstream review in that initial step, because they're just tired of telling them, the asset manager who doesn't care about it, like, code it this way. It's gone on deaf ears, right? But if that person downstream knows, hey, if I change it and the machine is going to recognize that and understand it, much more apt to put the time in and be like, okay, we're actually going to change it. And then a few months later, they see it actually worked, and then they're doing the process like you want them to do it, because there's some value for them in getting it. So then, never forget, with all technology, right? Like, there has to be a human value aspect of it. Like, people are trying to do their job, and they do not want to be forced to new tech without benefit for themselves, or and that's what really we have to communicate on that as well. So our data center example, again, impossible to hire enough people to get it to work. And the people that that do come on are really need to be focused on this kind of on the problems that come up. Basically, great new tool set, lots of opportunity. No matter where you're at in the cycle, you should think about how could we use this. I think always to kind of keep and retain and encourage our best employees. How do we get rid of inefficiency? How do we get rid of manual work? How do we get rid of the handwork? AI is great, but not all tools, right? Find the right tool for the job. Like, we actually use Relay for customer service, because we don't want to. We're a tech company. We don't want to have 20 employees around the clock doing that. So find the right tool for the job. And I think it's going to be amazing to see what happens when you have like this kind of new tool set with business understandings and problems come out, and we'll see what gets developed. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Give it up for Dave at PredictAP.